home from the secondhand bookshop, and so here they are. The first two here are what I've exchanged or trade my 6 volumes Folio Society 1001 Nights, Arabian Nights for. And I know. This one here is A Short History of Time, not to be confused with A Brief History of Time. And this one here is an American classic, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, Folio Society edition. So just really quickly showing you this one here, A Short History of Time, and not to be confused with Brief History of Time, which I believe is by Stephen Hawking, I think. I remember talking to some people about how characters in the Bible are often described as being several hundred years old, and then how ridiculous that was. And I remember asking the question as to whether we know if the year talked about in the Bible or in whatever manuscript that has been translated to English or whatever language we're reading the Bible in fact refer to a year which consists of 365 days, and each day consists of 24 hours, and each hour consists of 60 minutes, and each minute consists of 60 seconds in a way that we understand them today. Sorry, I have to pause periodically to cough. As I've mentioned, I thought I escaped the cough, but as October is approaching, apparently I'm coughing again. So for example here, it says subdivisions of the hour, Byzantine, Greek, medieval, Latin, and then there's Hebrew here, and then it says here 1 hour is 12 minutes. Here 1 hour is 15 minutes. Here 1 hour is 12 minutes. Here 1 hour is 1,080 halakim, or minims, etc., etc. And so you can imagine if you're translating old manuscripts and it says minutum, like this one here, or tiny thing, it could mean 4 minutes, it could mean 6 minutes, it could mean 24 minutes. I mean, how do you know? So I just find that really interesting. So it's more of a sort of a historical, cultural, social story of time rather than the scientific story of time. And I thought it's quite fascinating indeed. Look at that. And when people say, you know, the Bible say God created the world in 7 days, and I'm thinking, well, who says that one day is 24 hours? I mean, I don't know what day they're talking about, right? So that's that. And then the second book, of course, need no introduction, and I do understand that there's further discussion and debates about whether this is still the appropriate classic to be introduced to young people, every generations, or whether in the 21st century there need to be further questions and further discussions about it. This was written in 1960, and I believe the context is the deep south of the United States of America. It is a time and a place that I do not know very much about. All I remember is an old black and white movie version of it that I watched years ago, or that I watched parts of, on TCM, Turner's Classic Movies. Sorry again with the pausing and the coughing. And so this is Folio Society, what year is it? 96. Illustration by Afka Brouwer. Introduction by Albert French. The introduction is very, very good. 1996. So I will read out the introduction and look through. So this is 96, Folio Society. I will look through this book and read out the introduction in a separate video dedicated to it. And then I went back there to visit the 6 volumes Folio Society Arabian Nights to show you. And I found more books, if you recall. I showed you this one here, The Black Death, Beethoven's biography, both by Folio Society. And the third book is still behind the counter reserved for me, waiting for me to be able to bring back more books to trade for it. So far, I traded a whole box of books for these two. And then I traded another bag of books for $40 worth of exchange value, which has been credited to my account. And I'm $30 short to claim the Feudal Society book, also by Folio Society. I'm quite fascinated by the history of European history, in particular medieval and English history around Henry VIII, around the Renaissance, the 1500s, 1400s, the reign of Henry VIII, because of their connection to the Church of the Roman Church, the Roman Catholic Church that I grew up in. And my fascination with the Roman Catholic Church is due to a long life searching to understand if I belong really in the church. And I think I have decided that what I believe is very much not quite in line with where the church is at right now. However, all my life, that's all I know. You know, I've never been quote unquote any other religion. I've never belonged to any other religion. Even though currently my belief system is very much perhaps closer to the Anglican Church, the Church of England, and that's probably why my fascination with the era of Henry VIII, because he was the person responsible for the birth of the Church of England. And anyway, we'll discuss that some other time. So this is the Black Death, which is arguably a very pivotal history in Europe, in the development of how history unfolded in that part of the world, and therefore, you know, the domino effect from it. So this is 1997. This one here is first published by Collins in 1969. And this particular edition is 97. The preface is by Philip Ziegler. And the copyright is by Philip Ziegler as well. And paper map drawn by Dennis Baker, set in Minion Folio Society, printed in Edmondsbury Press. Berry Street, Edmund, on Caxton wove, bound in full cloth, blocked with a design by Francis Mosley at Hunter and Foley's, Edinburgh. So I really love the dancing skeleton there. There's another violin playing skeleton. There's a whole raft of shipped burnt, I guess. It's just black. I like the little rat over there. Again, I will read out the introduction and just talk a little bit more about the book in a separate video dedicated to the book. So I don't usually like to buy nice editions of non-fiction books such as this, but I found that a lot of Folio Society's editions of non-fictions are classics in the field. So like this one here is from 1968, and arguably they're not the most up-to-date textbook for, you know, to do research with or to study, but it would be one of the most pivotal work in the field, I suppose, if not academically, at least in popular culture, so that's important, and therefore it becomes a classic in its own right, because nonfiction, as you know, they will have, if you remember textbooks from school or from university, you would remember that you have to constantly buy the next revision to keep up to date with the information to stay relevant. They need to incorporate up-to-date research and new information, etc. But these ones, like that one there, is a classic for its kind, for example, and like for this one here, Beethoven, it is a biography, and although this isn't the only biography of Beethoven, but this one is I believe, a biography by a contemporary of his. That is not to say that the biography account from a contemporary is the most accurate or the most objective, but it is the most unique, I suppose, because of the confine of time within which they are writing from is the same. They occupy the same time space as the person they're writing about, and so it'd be quite different from reading a biography about, historical figures from a point of view of a researcher in the 21st century. So, for example, this particular book here is written by this guy here, Alexander Wheelock. I think you say Thayer or Taylor. This one is photographed in Bonn in 1890. And so this is, there's a sticker there, which is a detail of the previous owner. So I should have peeled that off before I filmed this. Alexander. So that's the guy there. And I am not normally intrigued by biographies of musicians, but especially musicians of this era. But I remember movies in the 90s, if you were old enough to remember this kind of movies in the 90s, with, I think, Gary Oldman, I think was the actor. I can't remember. It's called Immortal Beloved. And I remember being very taken by the title. And at the time, my English wasn't sufficiently complex to appreciate all the nuances of the movie. And I really would like to watch it again. But I know that they found a letter by Beethoven addressed to an immortal beloved, and nobody until today know who this immortal beloved is. And so the movie speculated as to who this might be. And also he's gone deaf. I think he went deaf. He became deaf, I think, before the end of his career, and he's a composer, a musician. Can you imagine being deaf as a musician, as a composer? Also, in some conversation I saw online, I remember someone mentioning or claiming for musicians such as Beethoven. I don't think they were particularly talking about Beethoven. I think they were talking about Bach or somebody, as a cultural elite. And I remember asking myself, how do we know they're cultural elites? Because just because they are associated today with the cultural elites doesn't necessarily mean that they were part of the cultural elites in those days. For example, physicians in the past, I mean, today they're considered to be a somewhat elite profession. But from what I know in the past, a couple of 100 years ago, they were considered to be rather a humble profession, like teachers. And sadly, teachers are still considered a humble profession, even though they are shaping the future of humanity. But, we can chat about that some other time. So I always find it fascinating to hear presumptions such as that. And so I become curious again, to know a bit more about how the life of the musicians such as this, they're working musicians, perhaps not unlike, I don't know, computer programmer or app designer these days, perhaps, or actors, or I don't know, or a writer perhaps, or a copywriter, or an editor, or I don't know, well, maybe a YouTuber, who knows? So, are YouTubers cultural elites, even though they're making millions? I don't know. So we can chat about this particular book independently as well, so that I can title them according to the title of the book, so that people can search. So they are searchable based on the titles of the books. So those are the 4 books. The 5th books are still at the Secondhand Bookstore, Feudal Society, I think it's called, and awaiting my next lot of book to be surrendered and swapped and traded for another $30 worth of credit, short of $30. And so when that time comes, I will come back with that other book as well. And until then, I talk to you later. Bye.